asked you, so when do you sign up for contests? And your response was?
I said, as late as possible. I said, in case I perish in between. I don't want to ruin the amount of inheritance I leave my family.
That's so good.
Well, I mean, like, here's the thing.
I get it.
What's the point in signing up on July 20th when you can do it on September 1st? Yeah. I mean, for people that are coming from out of town, I understand. But if you're local.
Yeah. You make very valid points. Where do you stand, too, on the crowd that feel the urge to put a Survivor entry in on the Thursday night game so that if they lose, then they can just rebuy and they have that ability to kind of play the field for game number 1?
I mean, look, to me, why not just make $1,000 straight bet on a game? I mean, if you're that concerned about the first game and you're burning Kansas City this year, I don't know if it's necessarily the most prudent play. Look, I can appreciate where people are coming from. I don't necessarily look at it as the best move. I think you want to take your best possible play because the one challenge here is it's like the NCAA tournament, except for 17, 18 weeks.
Pretty much. Well, you've had a lot of success in this contest, as well as Millions. We'll talk about the other, and it's not just Circa Millions. There's the Westgate Super Contest, and now nationally, a lot of different 5 against the spread picks a week you can make in that. But as far as Survivor goes, you've made it pretty deep in the past, Amal. What are some of the rules that you have tended to live by that some people might kind of scoff at or not really believe are true, yet are, when you look at it, break it down, are actually pretty good ways to approach it?
Yeah, I'll give you one. I tend to not take teams on the road. And, you know, in the NFL, anybody can be gotten any given day. And it doesn't necessarily mean because you're at home you can't be beat. I mean, we've seen, you know, you mentioned it before we came back, the Jets, they were like 16-point underdogs and they got beat by the Rams. I mean, they beat the Rams at home.
Yeah.
So I think that's just one thing. I just feel like teams at home generally have more success than they do on the road, and it's a proven fact in sports. When you look at the pricing in baseball, you'll see a team that's a $2 favorite at home today. Spencer Strider and the Braves, minus $2. If they were in Arizona, probably around minus 125, 135 against Zach Gallen.
Well, that's what made last year so crazy because you had week 1, a ton of road favorites. And San Francisco losing at Chicago was a big one that a lot of people lost their Survivor entry on. And I definitely try to follow the same principles. This year's a little bit different, at least because I think some people, again, I don't know where you stand on this either, Amal, where there are a lot of people that will map out the entire season from week 1 to week 18. And in Circa Survivor, for those who don't know, they require you to pick an extra game. The Thanksgiving Day slate is a totally separate entity. The Christmas Day, which I'm not sure how that is working out this year, Amal, since Christmas Day is on a Monday now. But at least last year there were 20 separate weeks, not just 18 weeks. So I look at it and go, how could you really say, how could you have enough conviction to go, this team will suck in week 16? I like to just start at week 1 and I play it week by week. Now I've never gotten that far, so maybe that's an issue on my end.
So in the first year I got to week 15 and I screwed up. I actually had the play. It was going to take the Ravens. I switched it because Finley was playing quarterback for the Bengals and I went against what I said and I took the Steelers on Monday night. They ended up losing. And had I done that, I would have been fine because I was going to take the Saints who destroyed Minnesota on Thanksgiving or on Christmas weekend, Friday, and then take the Pats in the last game of the year and they won against the Jets. The thing is this, here's why I map out the entire season. Because 2 factors. If you don't look to week 10 and you say, okay, Kansas City's playing this weak team now, I'm going to take them, then what do you do when you get to week 10? You should have some thought process of 2 to 3 to 4 teams that you're looking at taking during that stretch. It's like anything else in life. If you don't plan, you know, it's like the great John Wooden line, a failure to plan is planning to fail, right? And
Correct.
So it's a similar situation here. People say, well, how can you? No, you're not mapping out the whole season, but you have a pretty good idea. It's like if you make a futures bet, you think that team's going to be there at the end of the year, right? So it's a similar situation. You think that this team's going to be there. Then you adjust accordingly. You know, perfect example, there are some teams like Seattle, Jacksonville. You adjust according to how they're playing. You know, Seattle was a team I was going to go against last year. Didn't matter. I got bounced in week 2 with the Browns coming back, or Browns blowing the lead against the Jets. The Jets were the first team since, I think, around 1999 or 2000 to come back from down 13 points or more with less than 2 minutes to go. So you're kind of mapping it out. It wouldn't matter. I would have been gone in the 3rd week because the team that I liked in week 3 would have gotten bounced.
I lost with Tennessee week 1 last year.
Yeah, against the Giants. Yeah. Bullock missed the kick. But my point is, to me, I'm looking at certain situations like, okay, maybe I'm not necessarily going to play this team, but I've got to have a thought process. So I go through, I do the entire season, and then I will have 2 to 3 to 4 plays that I would potentially look at. Now, in theory, a quarterback could be hurt. A team could be in a tailspin, whatever, things change. But if you just sit there and say, okay, I'm going to take Dallas, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Kansas City, and Buffalo, and Cincinnati in the first 6 weeks, now all of a sudden, what do you do when you get to the back end? Now, there is a risk sometimes in saving those teams because they may not be as good as you thought as well.
And I think Circa does they do an extra bonus if you don't use the Super Bowl teams from the previous years. So like if you were to hold off, if you don't use Kansas City or Philadelphia, you get it. There's an extra bonus involved there.
Is that what that is this year? Because that was the case last year with Cincinnati and the Rams.
And again, we're talking kind of basic Survivor strategy because there are people who play in more contests than just the Circa one. That is the most popular one nationwide with the giant payouts that they offer there. But I look at the Week 1 card, and it's just interesting this year now, Amal, because you have a bunch of home favorites who are very heavily priced. And so there you could look at it and go, like I would imagine I would be surprised if many people at all took Kansas City as a 7-point favorite over Detroit, outside of the ones who just want to get one locked in for Thursday night, first game of the year. And if somehow, some way they lose, then they can buy back in.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't think you'll see a lot of people on that. But again, look, whatever your personal preference and choice is, you're going to go with it. At the same time, chances are the Chiefs probably win the game. Sometimes it's better than taking a matchup where it's a complete coin toss. You're going to get to a point around week 12, 13, 14, 15 where you're in certain games that it is a toss-up, and you got to just hope your team prevails.
Sure, absolutely. The thing I also feel like a lot of bettors get, and I include myself in this as well, that it can be a really dangerous game in Survivor, is trying to, for lack of a better term, slough off teams you aren't really high on. But let's say like they are home, they are favored, they have a good matchup against a poor team. Couple of one that will come to mind right away. It's the Washington Commanders, Arizona Cardinals matchup, Week 1. Commanders are a 6-point favorite right now.
Yeah.
I got to think that is going to be a very popular selection simply because most people's logic is, well, when am I using Washington again? This is an awful Arizona team. I'm going to look at the quote-unquote bingo square right off the mark. Just get Washington, get him out of the way. Those are the ones I always worry about just in general because of the fact that, well, if they aren't very good, they could certainly lose a game like that.
You're correct on that. And Washington with the uncertainty of quarterback could be a problem. But I'll tell you the other thing, unlike in betting, people are like, well, the whole crowd is on that. Well, in Circa Survivor, you don't want to sit there and think about that. And real quick, just to clarify, for people that are unaware, you cannot use the same team twice.
Yes.
So if you've used Washington, you will never be able to use them again, or if you use Kansas City or whomever. But look, I get your point. And Washington's an intriguing play in Week 1 because they take on the Arizona Cardinals, who many people think will wind up with one of the worst records in the NFL. But for me, when I look at a team like Washington, a guy like Kyler Murray, he could be a lot more dangerous in certain spots and situations than other people. So we'll see. I mean, a long way to go in terms of how these things play out. But I will tell you, I think this year is going to be much, much more difficult than I think years past. Because even if Arizona is bad, I still think they're 3 to 4 wins. Whereas there's no team that you're looking at that's going, well, that team's 0-17. That team is going to be one that goes 1-16 or something to that effect.
Well, in the year where I believe it was the year you were talking about them all, you made it to week 15, week 16, where I want to say there were like 20-some winners who shared the pot.
Yeah, it was like 60,000 each. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that year was you had a New York Jets team that was just an auto bet against every week, and the Jacksonville Jaguars were horrible. So essentially, what you could do, you pretty much could just play one or the other against those two teams, and it ended up being a situation where there were only a few weeks where you had to find something else. Where we don't see that happening this year. Like you mentioned, Arizona has the lowest win total on the board. Where, I mean, it's not like a team that is completely going to tank. That's a group that has so much draft capital already. They've got an opportunity they still have a quarterback in Kyler Murray. Not that I expect him to be great by any means, but don't expect any free bingo squares in most weeks, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I like the way you phrase that. You're 100% spot on. I don't think there's going to be that type of team. Now, it could happen. Let's say if Kyler Murray got hurt, then Arizona's in real trouble when you see this team. Remember we saw McCoy play quarterback for them?
Yeah.
They did. I think they beat the Rams, but the point is, you're going to pay attention to some of these teams that are bad, and you can't worry about, well, like the Washington example that you used. I would say probably 30 to 40% of the contest will be on Washington in Week 1. But you can't worry about that. Your job is to survive and move on.
Don't worry about the rest. And again, we don't know how long when Kyler Murray actually will come back for Arizona. I think that's part of it too. Yeah. The assumption that it'll be Colt McCoy Week 1. So Vikings laying 6.5 at home against Tampa Bay. Ravens -9 against Houston. Week 1 mentioned the Washington spot as well. Those are, and then the Seahawks -5 at home against the Rams. So 3 home favorites of 5 points or more, and that's not even including the Chiefs opening night. So I want, if any of those scare you off, I would imagine those 4 games, though, is where the bulk of the pool is going to be taken from.
I would agree with you. I think you see some intriguing ones. Baltimore's going to be one. I didn't realize Minnesota also has Tampa in Week 1. So I think those are all games that you could see potentially teams that are played heavily by other people.
Minnesota kind of follows that line of thinking, too. Well, maybe they regress this year. Let me use them now before they struggle against a projected bad Tampa Bay team.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.